Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 6th of April 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to a special edition of UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, child abuse campaigner Robert Green. Robert, thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Brian. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Good. Well, we're just going to say the weather, of course, is very changeable. That's life in Britain. So Plymouth is a little bit chilly, grey, drizzly at the moment. London and Brighton are apparently sunshine with a few April showers. Holland has descended into winter. Now, I don't know whether that means snow and frost and there's skating on the canals or it's just turned cold and rainy. But there we go. And variable across the rest of the country. First of all, I will say that we are aware of events in London at the moment. There's demonstrations going on apparently in relation to the so-called Panama Papers. We understand there's also demonstrations taking place in Iceland at the moment. We will report on those tomorrow, but today, because we have Robert Green with us, we're going to focus on what we think is one of the most important issues in Britain today, and that is the abuse of children, because ultimately this is the powerhouse which is fueling all of the control mechanisms, the blackmail, the intimidation, the very means by which our corrupt politicians, bankers, senior police officers are being controlled. This is a tough subject. We're going to take a look at some subjects which we think put together start to build a very clear picture. And Robert, you're going to take us into some of the detail around the Holly Gregg case, which of course has by no means gone away, even though the Scottish establishment has worked extremely hard to achieve a cover-up.
That is so.
Well, we'll start today with the very sad story of Jeanette Tate. Now, this was reported by the BBC News yesterday. Jeanette Tate murder file against Robert Black, already a man who was already in prison on murder, submitted to the CPS. Now, Robert Black has now died. The Mail's picked up on this story, and the headline's very interesting. Serial killer Robert Black did murder 13-year-old Jeanette Tate 38 years ago, police conclude. We are very, very interested in that headline because it is simply not true. There is no evidence that Robert Black murdered Jeanette Tate, and we think there's some real significance in the way that this is being spun at the moment by the press. So let's just have a look at this. UK Column can reveal that Devon and Cornwall police were recently presented with new evidence, including the identity of a murder suspect who was definitely not Robert Black. But apparently Devon and Cornwall Constabulary refused to fully investigate, and that was amidst accusations of intimidation of witnesses and stonewalling of mainstream journalists who started to ask questions. Now, everything, Robert, appears to be in this case that Devon and Cornwall police were desperate to pin the blame on Robert Black. He was in prison. He'd already murdered before.
Yes. He
He dies, and the impression I get is that Devon and Cornwall police thought this will be a good way to wrap up this investigation. What's your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that if new evidence has come forward about another possible suspect, I'm not quite sure after 38 years how Devon and Cornwall police can actually substantiate that Robert Black was indeed the murderer when there is new evidence to say that another person may be that murderer. How can they wrap up the investigation? And why could it take them so long if the evidence was so strong against Black? Why has it taken them 38 years to come forward over this?
It's the questions that do the damage on this
Yes.
On this case, Robert, and of course you're picking up exactly on those questions. Let's just remind ourselves of a little bit about this case. Many years ago, but it was very, very well broadcast. It was very emotive and provocative. So a lot of people knew about the disappearance of Jeanette Tate. She disappeared after being sighted riding her bicycle, disappeared into thin air. Now, at the time, these were images that were put out. So she went missing at 3:37 p.m. on the 19th of August 1978. And here you've got a picture of some of the posters that the police rapidly put out saying, have you seen this missing girl? Have you seen Jeanette Tate? Now, look very closely at the little girl. This is another poster from the Western Times, £1,000 reward, a lot of money for Jeanette Tate. Now, these images are clearly of a very young girl. And this is of interest because this is actually how Jeanette Tate looked at the time. She looked a young teenager. She had already begun to change substantially.
Sure, yes.
So my question is, why were the police and the media pushing out images of a girl which didn't look like Jeanette Tate, essentially?
Well, I think that's a very serious question to answer, for the police to answer. I think with the picture of her as a teenager, she was 13, she looks about 13. Why would the main photograph be of a child, obviously, in my eyes, considerably younger than that, if they were looking for people who'd seen her shortly before she went missing?
It's an interesting question. Well, we move on to this one, and we only picked this up shortly before we went live with today's news. And the Mirror here reporting in June last year that a body that was washed up a year after on the beach, a year after she disappeared, a retired police constable is saying that, in his opinion, this could have been the body of Jeanette Tate. But at the time, there was no DNA. DNA technology was not in existence to actually carry out that sort of test. However, he says that Devon and Cornwall police have got DNA evidence of Jeanette Tate on one of her sweaters, and he's saying this should be carried out. But as far as we can see, it seems to have disappeared into a black hole.
Yes, it does seem that. And obviously, had this DNA been there earlier, then why did the police not make some statement about it, if it had some means of possibly referring to the person who killed her?
Fascinating sequence of events, but I will just add that information that was brought forward to the police was either rebuffed or met with a very hostile response. So instead of the police welcoming new evidence forward, really taking time to see what the validity of that evidence was, there was a very hostile reaction. And we also know that mainstream journalists who started to ask Devon and Cornwall some pretty penetrating questions as to what was going on were also met with this rather hostile response. And I'll just add, it's also remarkable that when we as the UK column went into a local police station in Plymouth to report the abuse of a young baby boy in South Wales, this was several years ago, we met absolute hostility by those Plymouth policemen, one of whom shouted at us to get out of his interview room. So the police seem to be very reluctant to investigate these child murders.
Yes, they do. And I think the worrying thing is, if the police are being hostile to people like yourselves who can actually broadcast this, are they being hostile to other people who may come forward? And we never know about it.
We don't know. But what we do know is that it needs the public to really continue digging in order to get the truth up to the surface. Well, let's just remind ourselves of what Britain is about. We showed this yesterday. This is the young couple. They've had their 5-day-old baby kidnapped by Southampton Social Services. They were in London yesterday trying to inform other members of the public of the dangers of social services in Britain. So this baby not registered, simply taken away by social services because the mother didn't open the door to a visit by local midwives. Baby unregistered, mother had a little bit of contact initially, this very cruel treatment, you can see your baby for 1 hour every 2 weeks. But I understand now in nearly a month, the mother has not seen that baby, has no idea where the baby is. And as the parents are saying, because the mother is Portuguese, it doesn't matter what nationality you are. If you come to Britain, as a tourist, for example, Robert, you can simply have your child taken away from you.
Well, this must be a worry and perhaps something that people abroad should be made aware of. If you're unfortunate enough for your child to be taken ill or perhaps be involved in an accident, you would expect to be treated properly by the British authorities and health service. But if this kind of thing is going on, I think it must be a great worry for anyone, or should be a worry for anyone considering bringing their children to this country, even for a short holiday.
You have an accident or
Yes.
have a car accident or something goes wrong.
Yes.
The next minute, social services, it doesn't matter if you're Lithuanian or Russian or Portuguese. Apparently, the British government has the ability to simply take your child.
Yes.
Yes. I use the words unbelievably serious. Sometimes I don't know how to express the seriousness of
I
this.
think it is has most sinister implications, I would say.
Let's look at Nottingham. We're just reminding ourselves here, but of course, Melanie Shaw, Mickey Summers, and other victims of abuse in Nottingham highlighted massive abuse through the children's so-called care homes, Beechwood being the lead one. The police are then investigating another 7. We've had this man sentenced for abuse within that very care home system. But of course, what has happened to Melanie Shaw as the whistleblower? She's been bullied by Nottingham police, victimised, followed. Yes. She has been put in prison. She's had medication denied. She's had her house taken away, and she's had her son taken away by social services. Yes. And there are some great concerns at the moment as to the safety of Melanie Shaw's son in the hands of Nottingham social services. So we've got a particularly sinister picture building up here, Robert, yes. Where can we, I'll ask you the question, can we trust Britain's police to investigate child abuse cases?
I think the answer is no, a firm no. How can we trust the police to do that? I have my own experience of police behaviour in Scotland and in England as well in relation to the Holly Gregg case. I do not think the police can be trusted at all in any cases involving child abuse.
Right, that's a pretty serious statement. We can reinforce that by saying that we have Metropolitan police officers happy to tell us that when they were involved in child abuse investigations, those investigations were closed down by senior officers the moment names started to touch on politicians, judges, and in some cases other senior police officers. And massive bullying of police who've tried to speak out and blow the whistle about these close downs.
Yes.
Well, perhaps we should trust this lady because, as we pointed out recently, we've got Justice Goddard, who has now decided that she's going to expand her inquiry because she's a little bit worried there's been some accusations which have hurt a few people.
Oh dear. They wouldn't have to be famous people, would they?
Well, it would appear so, mainly, but she said the public inquiry into child sexual abuse will not ignore the damage done to prominent people. It doesn't matter if you're a poor person or you're not well known, but if you're prominent, then Justice Goddard wants to make sure that you're okay. And of course, Harvey Proctor in set there is one of the most outspoken people. We don't need to know whether he's guilty or not guilty. We only know that that man is not campaigning for justice for child abuse victims.
That's right. I'm puzzled about this because I didn't think it was in Goddard's remit to be concerned about whether or not allegations against famous people are substantiated or not. I didn't think that was part of the purpose of her being there.
Part of her terms of reference. I don't remember reading that in her terms of reference, so presumably she's expanded her own terms of reference, which is operating outside authority, which seems to be the pattern the moment you want to cover something up.
Yes. Also, of course, just going a little bit off the subject very slightly, but there doesn't seem to be much call for apologies for perhaps ordinary members of the public who've been accused of something wrongly by famous people, as in the fact of Ben Fellows by Kenneth Clarke.
Well, this is true because justice is not for ordinary people. Justice is supposedly just for the rich and famous. And of course, we can now see this cluster coming together through Parliament and the rest of it. Yeah. And of course, when people who work in public services do the right thing and come forward, well, they can expect the world to explode. And Carol Woods has got to be a classic example at the moment that here we have a senior social worker who whistle blew on the fact she was asked to falsify records to enable Lancashire Social Services to take children unlawfully. She wasn't asked to do it once, she was asked to do it several times. So we've seen that young couple in Southampton, they're saying their child, 5-day-old baby, taken away for no reason. And now we can see how that can happen because we've got this social worker saying she was asked to falsify those records.
Yes.
How can we describe this to people who are perhaps just picking up on it today?
I don't know how we can describe it, but I think one thing to bear in mind is I can't see any motive for the lady concerned, I've never met, Carol Woods, to come out with such allegations if she had anything to gain from it. She could only put herself in the firing line further by doing so. Yep. So one would have to say at first that she, as far as I'm concerned, it's more reasonable to believe her than believe the opposition who might want to discredit her in any way. That is my view.
Robert, that's true. But also, if we think about how justice is supposed to work in this country, if somebody suffers an injury or an injustice, they speak out, and the start of the process is when the person says, I've been injured, I've been hurt, I've been robbed. The law should be starting to work in their favour to find out what the circumstances were, what the truth around that issue was.
Yes.
We've now got a total reversal.
Yes.
Where you have to prove what you're saying. It's not enough to come forward and say it. Yes. The state says, well, that can't possibly be true. You have to prove your statement. So this is inversion of law. Some people would say it's satanic.
I think it is highly likely to be satanic. It is an inversion of everything that is good. That is the nature of Satanism. I shall be coming to that in a little while when we talk Holly Gregg case. Okay, well, let's come on to some of the meat. You've come up against this lady in a very big way. Yes. The former Procurator's Fiscal in Scotland, Dame Eilish Angelini. And subsequently Lord Advocate.
And subsequently Lord Advocate, yes. Well, here's the Herald Scotland headline. There were many other across UK that she was brought in by Theresa May, the Home Secretary, to lead, and notice the word, there it is, the independent review of deaths and serious incidents in police custody. Many people were deeply surprised to see this woman brought in. She'd previously done another report for the Metropolitan Police into their handling of sexual abuse crimes. Now she's brought in to investigate deaths. We know about the death of Mr. Bayou in Scotland in police custody. Why would you have concerns about this lady being given this sort of role?
Well, the first thing, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in a moment, but the first thing I would perhaps point out is that Miss Angelini's close associate and personal solicitor, Peter Watson of Levy and McRae, still represents the Scottish Police Federation and was one of the first people to come forward to discredit the family of poor Mr. Bayou for trying to spread all kinds of false rumours about the cause of his death in police custody. So our own solicitor is trying to attack the very people who are trying to get a proper investigation.
And this is the same solicitor who is presently embroiled in the Heather Capital fraud case. So I think he actually appeared in court this earlier this week.
I understand so. There seems to be very sparse evidence about this for some reason. But Peter Watson is regarded as a central figure, has been publicly mentioned as a central figure in a 28.4 million fraud. I should also mention to those watching who don't know this, that he was formerly a sheriff, and he was suspended as a result of the investigations into his conduct regarding Heather Capital.
Yeah. But we're apparently led to believe that Dame Eilish Angelini would have no idea of the background of the senior lawman that she chose to...
No, she wouldn't. According to recent report by Russell Finlay in the Scottish Sun, it seems that the possibility of knowledge of Mr. Watson's involvement in this went back all the way to 2010. But it didn't stop Eilish Angelini choosing this man as her personal solicitor, nor did it prevent Alex Salmond having the same person as a solicitor. don't these people have any kind of intelligence set up in Scotland at all?
Well, either they're grossly ignorant of what's actually going on, or they know but they don't care. Either way, it's a worry for the public, isn't it? Because if we've got senior people in politics or the justice system and they simply do not know
Yes.
when criminal activity or allegations of criminal
Yes.
activity is going on, that's a big worry if they're running the country, for
Very
example.
much so, very much so. I'll just return to the initial question about Angelini, Alicia Angelini. She was, in fact, as you said, she was the Procurator Fiscal, which is prosecutor, in Aberdeen. And she was in that situation when Holly Gregg made a lot of her major statements back in 2000. And she subsequently was promoted to be Lord Advocate, which is the head of the whole really sort of justice system really in Scotland, as far as prosecutions and so forth is concerned. And in the process of me naming her as the person who tried to, who certainly did try to cover up the Holly Gregg case, because she was in situ at the time, she, amongst other things, apart from having me arrested the first time, when I subsequently went to prison in 2010, she also took out later a private civil case against me, ostensibly on the basis of me forcibly accusing her of covering up the case. Although we will be showing some evidence now that that her statement is totally untrue and she was involved.
Or she was very confused.
Well, I don't know about being confused. I was a bit confused, but I don't know whether she was.
Well, we'll see how our audience reacts to some of the documents we're going to put up. We just have to bring this in because we have this thing that either she knew and wasn't telling the truth, or she was remarkable, so confused, it's a wonder she could hold down her job, or else she's maybe got some serious problems.
Well, in a way, I try to find a reason for her behaviour. You know, a rational reason for the way she's behaved in order to excuse it. But I can't think of one, and neither can anybody else.
That's absolutely true. We're smiling. It's a very serious subject. Let's just show Robert here, who's been doing all sorts of campaigning. You've been across the country. You've given many talks about the abuse of children and the cover-up, particularly the Holly Gregg abuse case in Scotland. And as you've just said, Eilish Angelini ordered charges against you. Now, you have spent over 6 months in prison, largely campaigning for the truth to come out about the abuse of Holly Gregg and the cover-up by the Scottish state of this horrific abuse. People have said to me, why is Robert Green prepared to go to prison? Why were you prepared to go to prison for Holly Gregg?
Well, it wasn't just for Holly Gregg. Holly Gregg is the case that I know about and can speak of with some authority, but it is to do with the background to all this. When I first took up the case, it was quite clear that I could not have taken the case up without expert witness information. Much as I liked Holly, I couldn't. I was not an expert in any of the fields. I'm not an expert in medical things. I'm not an expert in the condition of Down syndrome from which Holly suffers. I have no legal expertise. I really have no expertise at all in this. But what I did do was to have a look at the expert witness analysis of Holly Gregg, and without any question at all, they were unequivocal about the fact that she had been abused, and her perpetrators were named in several documents. In fact, one of the documents by Dr. Eva Harding was done at the behest of Enable, which is First Minister Nicola Sturgeon's chosen charity. So we would think they're all right. And they came to the conclusion that two people in particular who had been named by Holly were categorically described as being abusers, and Dr. Harding also stated that Holly was also probably abused by those who had access to her. That document, along with the document we'll be referring to a little bit later from Dr. Jack Boyle, were presented to the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority, and the authority thought fit, on the weight of the evidence, expert evidence, that Holly was indeed a victim of sexual abuse, and awarded her £13,500 compensation out of public funds. So it's very odd that no investigation has ever taken place by the police.
No, and that is a key point which we must not lose sight of, because that is the absolute foundation. The police don't investigate, so there's no crime.
Yes.
Well, we've reported on you and for you many times, Robert. This is UK column reporting in 2012.
Yes.
We haven't got time today to talk about what went on in all the court cases. We want to concentrate on documents. But I'm going to say here that with hindsight, I should have put a letter into our subheadline, Scotland proves itself to be paedophile capital of the world. That should be a paedophile capital, because to be fair, we now know, of course, that London is equally as disgusting in what's going on. So to be fair to all of those people listening and watching north of the border, we also realise, of course, that the same cesspit is in London.
I think it's important that for all our Scottish friends and Scottish people who don't know much about this at the present time, is that I've absolutely nothing against Scotland, nothing whatsoever. It just happens to be the case I was invited to investigate, and the only one that I can speak with authority.
Yeah.
But I know it's very bad elsewhere. There's no question. No, I don't think any of the component countries of the United Kingdom are in any position to lecture to any other countries in the Union.
I certainly agree with that. Let's have a look at some of the detailed documentation, which to us shows what is actually going on and what has been going on. And this first one is part of a communication from Angela Cullen, the Director of Audit Scotland. We will put this into context in a minute, but the thing which interested you, Robert, was this. It says here that there's a little dialogue going on between Audit Scotland and the Crown Office itself.
That's correct, yes.
And this is deemed to be official sensitive.
Yes, but I think this is rather curious. I would ask the question, sensitive to whom? It's not sensitive to me, but who is it sensitive to? And why would it be sensitive?
And what it's talking about is where senior government people get involved in civil legal proceedings. All of a sudden, this has become terribly sensitive. Not let's get the lid off for the general public, but let's help cover it up. Yes. Well, Audit Scotland recently released quite a few documents, which I'm hoping that David Scott will have a good look at, but this is just to show our viewers today that this is the document from the 1st of April where a lot of information has been released.
I think I should perhaps just emphasise the reason why this investigation has been going on by Audit Scotland was that I challenged Elise Angeline when she took her civil action against me to ask how she was funded, and even asked the question in court. I was denied legal aid by the Scottish authorities to defend myself, but Elise Angelini was given the services of one of Scotland's most prominent and highly qualified QCs, Roddy Dunlop QC. And I wondered why and how she got the money to have him representing her, and I could get nothing to defend myself in what is legally a foreign country with a separate legal jurisdiction. I had to defend myself. So I wanted to know where the money came from and if Angelini paid for Mr. Dunlop's services herself or whether it came from the state, the public purse. When I say the public purse, I'm not just talking about the Scottish public purse, because this matter is not devolved. If the money had come from the public purse, which we now know it has, it comes from the taxes of every single person in the United Kingdom. And that means if MPs, and some have already tried to intervene on this one, say that it's not their case, then it is, because that is your money, ladies and gentlemen, has been used to try and silence me over the horrific rape of a disabled girl.
Our money. So we move on through this document, and what do we come to? Well, we come to the fact that they don't really want to tell us very much. So the letter came from Ian Loghead here, the correspondence manager, but it was quite detailed. We'd taken a selection out. Here they're saying the audit exemptions in section 4A and B are subject to the public interest test, which is considered below. Headline, public interest test. And what do they say? Well, within that section, and let's get to the nitty-gritty, they say this, and the bit we're interested in is here. It says issue of concern, raised by you, the previous disclosure into the public domain of the requested information gathered as part of these inquiries would substantially prejudice Audit Scotland's ability to effectively carry out its role and remit going forward. Therefore, on balance, we're not going to give you the information. Now, I think my comprehension of matters English and text is reasonable. They are saying that it would prejudice their ability to effectively carry out its role. So telling the truth about where public money went would undermine their role to look after public money.
It would. I find that very confusing indeed. I mean, perhaps I'm being a little harsh here, but does that mean that Audit Scotland are presently empowered to cover up possible criminal offences by leading figures in the Scottish establishment? That is the question.
Or we could say perverting the course of justice.
Yes,
we could use that expression.
I think that is true. And of course, this affects people in the rest of the United Kingdom. It's not the Scottish regime just covering up for itself and nobody else can do anything about it because it's not directly their business. This is the business of every taxpayer in the United Kingdom.
Well, we'd like to say what we think is going on here, and if we can just pop that one back on screen, we'll bring in this because we think what we're looking at here is a massive cover-up. When the public asks where public money has been spent, was it used to pay for private civil actions? Audit Scotland doesn't want to say. Well, this turned up on your doorstep a little while ago,
yes,
Robert.
It is.
It's an article from the Press and Journal.
Yes.
It was dated the 18th, the 11th, 2009, yes. And it was quite a comprehensive article. This was part of it. It goes on here. And it was talking about the whole of the Holly Gregg abuse case. It was measured, it was detailed. Seems to have disappeared from the Press and Journal's website. We couldn't find it. It may be there. But you were particularly interested in these little statements at the end because it said that Grampian Police last night confirmed the force was investigating an allegation of historic sex abuse. And the article also said that a Crown Office spokeswoman said late last night, we have not received any report from the police. If we do receive a report, it will be carefully considered in due course. So detailed article there, which tells us some things. It says the police were investigating and the Crown Office saying, well, we haven't received anything yet.
No, I think just one thing, if people do get the chance to look at this article, which I hope they will, it's a very sympathetic and accurate article. And I can say that because I was there when Holly gave her statement to the police. And with the only mistake in that I can see, the obvious mistake in the article, was that it mentioned that Holly had accused 24 men. No, she didn't. She accused 22 men and women and also 7 child victims that she had observed being abused at that time. So right from the start, let us say there were 29, quite apart from all the medical evidence and the expert evidence, including support from the former Chief Constable of Grampian Police, Andrew Brown QPM, there were straight away 29 potential corroborative witnesses to the crime. And of course, it is agreed that Holly has suffered from a crime. So a crime has indeed been committed. So there has to be at least one perpetrator.
But we don't have a crime because the police didn't fully investigate.
No, they didn't. No.
Just remember where we started today with that story about Jeanette Tate and what Devon and Cornwall Police are not doing. Well, let's have a look at this document because it goes on now. We're into December 2009 and we've got a communication here from the Procurator Fiscal's office. We'll just bring out a couple of paragraphs here. Having reviewed all the circumstances of Holly case, including her statement and all the other available evidence, a report was prepared for consideration of Crown Counsel. The conclusion is that there is insufficient evidence to allow criminal proceedings. So you don't investigate and then you say, well, clearly there's no evidence. And we'll just bring in one more and then I'll let you comment on that. Here it says, during the course of this investigation, it's been alleged by others that the Lord Advocate, Eilish Angelina QC, had in some way covered up Holly's allegations. These allegations are unfounded and this has been supported by a careful scrutiny of the case. All key decisions in relation to prosecution in Holland's case in 2000-2001 were taken before or after the Lord Advocate's time as Regional Procurator Fiscal in Grampian. and were taken by other senior prosecutors, not the Lord Advocate. In addition, the Lord Advocate has not had any involvement in the recent decision by Queen. So it's saying here repeatedly that Eilish Angelini had no involvement in the Holly Gregg case.
It is very curious, because if the article that we've talked about from the Press and Journal is correct, we've no reason to suspect that it isn't, then it would indicate that the decision not to take any action against what happened to Holly took place between the 18th of November 2009 and the 4th of December 2009, because the prosecutor's office hadn't had any documents on the night of the 17th of November. And of course, this makes it very curious, because later on at my trial, it was established by the police officer who conducted the interview, Holly, DC Lisa Jane Evans, that under cross-examination, she admitted that the police had not questioned a single one of the 29 people that Holly had... 29 people, including the 7 other... It was 22 abused, but 7 other potential
So there were even
witnesses.
more people?
Yes, that is 22 accused and 7 child victims that she'd seen.
Right.
So there are 22 potential witnesses there who could corroborate things. And of course, none of them were questioned, despite the fact of all the expert witness evidence supporting Holly, which the police had in their possession at my trial.
All right. And if we just come back to social worker Carol Woods, when she steps forward and says she was asked to falsify reports so children could be stolen, we don't know what those children ultimately used for. She couldn't get any involvement with the police until one police officer stepped forward to help her. That was Mike Todd. And within a couple of weeks, Mike Todd is dead.
Yes. Well, this is important. I think it's very important at this stage to bring in perhaps the most sinister aspect of this case, and I think possibly other cases as well, and that's the subject of Satanist ritual abuse, SRA as it is known. And Holly has described incidents, that very, very serious incidents, would indicate quite categorically that this kind of abuse has happened to Holly and others. I'm not going to go into the details that I'm well aware of this. It's almost too horrific to describe publicly. But what I can say is that Holly had described incidents involving the murder of a dog and the drinking of its blood, and also the sacrifice of a human who Holly did not know was described as a brown man, and then his body was dismembered and eaten. That is what she has said, and she has been described by everyone who has interviewed her about this case as a thoroughly truthful witness. No one is in any way making any allegations that Holly is saying anything other than the truth. So what I'm saying is not my words, they're the words that were relayed to me by Holly, who has been described in that way by people who are in a position to know whether someone like Holly is truthful or not. And they all absolutely support her.
And this brings in, Robert, a remarkable similarity, of course, with what came out of the mouths of the young boy and girl in Hampstead.
Yes.
And what happened in Hampstead, no full and proper police investigation of those who were identified. So let's follow through, because the Scottish Government is telling us very clearly that former Procurator Fiscal not involved. Now, we've got another document here. What is this? This is Press Complaints Commission.
Yes.
And what are they saying? We have been asked by the Lord Advocate to make clear the following. There is no allegation of a paedophile ring contained in the police report to the Procurator Fiscal at the time. There was no allegation about a sheriff. And she was unaware of the claim at the time and never had any involvement in the case. So we've got to be really fair here, because Dame Eilish Angelini is saying to the Press Complaints Commission that she has never had any involvement in the case.
That is what she has said. And this was an action against the Firm magazine, a well-known and respected legal magazine in Scotland, who'd more or less made the same allegations that I had made, that Eilish Angelini was in fact involved and covered up the Holly Gregg case.
Right. So, but this is an important thing. She says that she didn't have any involvement. Then we have this interesting letter dated the 6th of August 2014. And what is this one here that we've got? This is the Scottish Government making a statement about the Holly Gregg
Yes,
case.
it's the Criminal Directorate, which was led by the then Secretary for Justice, Kenny McCaskill, who many people in south of the border will probably have known about.
Okay, well, people
What
are
he
wondering.
said, so this is what he said. This is the head man, the Secretary for Justice in Scotland, and this is what he has to say about Elise Angelini in relation to the Holly Gregg case.
Okay,
Listen
well,
to this and remember what you've just heard.
That we've heard very clearly so far that she wasn't involved. Let's hear what the Scottish Government say. We'll bring this up on screen. I understand that a Mr. Scott in the audience asked the Cabinet Secretary a question about the Holly Gregg case. In answering the question, the Cabinet Secretary made clear that the allegations Mr. Scott referred to were investigated by Grampian Police and reviewed by the then Lord Advocate Dame Eilish Angelini and were found to be false. So I'm very confused, Robert. I find this whole thing so confusing because either the Scottish Government doesn't know what the left and right hand or their feet are doing, or else somebody is lying, or somebody has got some mental cognitive limitations, or what we're looking at is a cover-up here.
At the highest level.
At the highest level.
Now, I think this is particularly interesting, and I think anybody would find it interesting, because it needs to remind that Mr. McCaskill wasn't caught on the hop over this. He'd been fully informed many, many times, including direct questions from me at a public meeting about this precise issue about Elise Angelini and her involvement in the case. In fact, he, on a hustings meeting on the 11th of April in Portobello, which is just north of Edinburgh, in Mr. McCaskill's constituency, he actually told me categorically that he had nothing to do with it. So this is a very curious thing. So if anybody thinks, oh, perhaps Mr. McCaskill was mistaken and caught on the hop, he wasn't. He already knew all about this. And he would not have made that statement at that stage, that sensitive stage, had he not known that this was factual about Elise Angelini being involved in the case. I think we should also perhaps just go back briefly to the Press and Journal article that you referred to and the letter of the 4th of December 2009 to Holly's mother, in fact, wrapping up the investigation. So it would seem within that period of just over 2 weeks, the decision was made not to go ahead with the case. And I maintain that decision was made by Elise Angelini, possibly overruling the police.
Right. Maybe the police weren't telling her the truth, Robert.
They may not be. They may not have been telling her the truth, but it seems very unlikely. Because whatever the situation, she had said she wasn't involved, and she was, quite clearly.
Well, let's have a look at a little bit about the case, because people are saying I don't really know much about what went on around the Holly Gregg case. To give just clear detail about the case, this was the opinion of eminent expert witness psychologist Jack Boyle. And he said this. Now, this is a general statement, which, of course, is very important because it doesn't just apply to Holly's case. It applies to all cases where children are abused. Hampstead, for example. In general, the research indicates that children do not make up false stories of sexual abuse, although obtaining information from children with learning difficulties is very difficult. The perpetrator in all cases has enormous motivation to deny and make accusations such as the child is lying, misunderstands normal behaviour, or has been primed by the mother. So this
you couldn't be clearer, and I think we should say you can look up Dr. Boyle's terms of reference and so forth, and I think you'll find that he's given evidence in 1,000 cases in Scotland. So this is obviously a man who's regarded by everyone as knowing what he's talking about.
Yes. And we see these accusations made against mothers and fathers time and time again. I spoke to a lady in New Zealand who had her children taken away from her. What did they do? They tried to brand her as mentally ill.
Yes.
Common tactic is say the mother is going to kill the children, then commit suicide.
Yes.
So my limited experience compared to this psychologist totally agrees with what he's talking about.
In fact, if I can just come in there, Brian, to expand on that a little bit. When the Hampstead case came about, which obviously is something I know nothing, apart from the fact that the same judge was involved, Justice Porfley, who was also involved in the British case or the English case against Holly Gregg, put forward by Shropshire Council in an attempt to silence her in England as well. When I recall this letter from Dr. Boyle, which was one of the two letters used in the to convince the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority that Holly was a genuine victim, I sent a copy to Sir James Mumby, who was of course, is the head of the family court, and I asked him the question about how could the Justice Porfley overlook a professional opinion such as this, because obviously it's quite clear that she did everything to try to destroy the credibility of the children concerned and those who are supporting her. But there we have one of Britain's, not just Scotland, one of Britain's top experts giving that opinion. It's a case I know nothing about, but I was very surprised that the opinion of people such as Dr. Boyle, and I suspect that other experts of his stature would say very much the same thing, could possibly be ignored. Yeah. Why would she do that? Sir James Mumby, you won't be surprised, has not responded to my letter.
Well, what we do know happened is exactly what Dr. Boyle was talking about, is that Anne Gregg was accused of being mentally ill, particularly vicious. She was put into a psychiatric unit. We have talked about this horrible procedure happening to other people, including former social worker Carol Woods. So you cause trouble with the state, you try and expose the abuse of the children, you are vilified, you're mad, you're put into a psychiatric unit. So this was a report on Holly Gregg's mother, and what does it say? Well, actually, it says that there is nothing wrong with this lady at all. But look at the start of this. It is referring to Holly's mum, Miss X in this case, has faced family trauma on an unbelievable level. Instead of being helped to deal with the pain she has experienced, she has faced the worst injustices that the Scottish legal system is capable of. Nobody within the helping professions comes out well from this decade of sustained attack and discrediting. But it then goes on to say that Miss X is a strong woman capable of dealing with the traumatic events without becoming vengeful, violent, or hysterical. And there's nothing wrong with her. No. But we've got this juxtaposition, haven't we, of the worst the Scottish legal system is capable of. What had this lady done? She'd simply tried to protect her daughter, yes, and she's attacked by the Scottish legal system. And what were they trying to do? They were trying to brand her as mad, where this psychologist says absolutely nothing wrong with mother at all.
No, and in fact she gives a great compliment in the last sentence there. If you'd like to read it, Brian.
Let's see if I can read it. Where are we? She is able to marshal her thoughts and feelings in a coherent way and has emerged as a woman of great substance. It was a privilege to meet her. So somebody doing a psychological assessment, and as you say, Robert, totally reinforcing the fact that
yes,
Holly Gregg's mum, a wonderful lady who stood up to that abuse.
That is correct.
What was her crime? Trying to protect her daughter.
That is absolutely correct. And Dr. Simpson is one of the leading experts in her field, just to reinforce that.
Okay. Well, we've got another document here which we think is relevant. This is from the Down Syndrome Association, particularly pertinent to Holly, of course. And what did they have to say? Well, they said this: Holly has made a number of very serious allegations of sexual abuse, both against members of her family and against people working in social services. Mm-hmm. Interesting, isn't it? Yes. Allegations which I find entirely credible, having seen a psychologist's report on Holly and knowing the prevalence of abuse of people with learning difficulties. So the Down Syndrome Association themselves know that vulnerable children in particular are targeted. Yes. And they go on to say, in spite of this, the allegations have not been fully investigated. For example, members of staff whom she has named in her allegations have not been interviewed by the police. How much evidence does the British public want that what we've got on here is an orchestrated cover-up of the abuse of a highly vulnerable young girl? Who is involved in this cover-up? We've got the Scottish police, we've got the judicial system, we've got the Procurator, yes, Fiscal's office. It's
Well,
I'm lost for words. This is happening
horrendous.
more and more.
And I would like
Robert.
to tell everyone that the documents that we've been talking about today have all been placed in the hands of Theresa May, David Cameron. David Cameron's been informed of this about quite a long time, and also Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister in Scotland. Her predecessor, of course, should not be forgotten in this case, and that he was. We have documents linking Mr. Salmond with the case from 2007, not in any personal way, but the fact he knew about what was going on. And in fact, in 2011, 26th of May 2011, he was found by the Information Commissioner to have twice breached the law, sections 10.1 and 21.1 of the Freedom of Information Act Scotland, in trying to cover up the Holly Gregg case. So there we are, and subsequently he sent a letter to his own constituency office dated the 14th of February 2014, quite clearly, I think Brian has already showed this on the programme a few weeks ago, quite clearly an attempt to even deceive his own constituency secretary at the time, Mr. Neil Bailey. All that information is with the leader of the SNP in Parliament, Angus Robertson. I've asked him to acknowledge that he's seen the document. I've also asked Nicola Sturgeon if she's received and read the documents condemning Mr. Salmond. I did that in November, and so far Mr. Sturgeon's office has sent a letter in January confirming that they've got the information, that they will reply to me. Well, I'm still waiting, Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Scotland, and I think it's about time you thought about the duty to the children in your country rather than trying to cover up for corrupt people who operate in the highest level in your country. I think it's about time you put the children first. So there.
Well, of course, I'm going to put a qualifier in there, Robert, because we have to be very careful, because Ms. Sturgeon at the moment is trying to say the only people capable of bringing up your child is the Scottish Government, named person scheme.
Oh,
so
yes.
something very dangerous going on
That's
here.
1 million Scottish children. And this is being enforced on the public at the moment by a government that cannot even protect Holly Gregg. Would you trust them with your child?
I certainly wouldn't. So we'll just round off here. This is back to Audit Scotland. Follow the money is always a good trail. And this is a nice little dialogue between Audit Scotland.
Yes, it is.
Should we? Can I read a bit of this? It says, "Hi, I hope all is well at COPP."
COPS.
FS,
We just
COPS.
said COPS. It's a bit unimportant.
So that's the Crown Office Procurator Fiscals Service in Scotland. Hi, I hope all is well with you. I'm currently working with somebody on investigating a complaint we've received in relation to payments made by COPFS. The payments were in respect of expenditure to cover employee costs when legal action was necessary as a result of actions they'd taken in the course of public duties. Can you advise, please, if there's a separate code in the ledger? Hi, how are you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you okay?
It's nice because it's a serious investigation, isn't it?
Yeah, there's been a little bit of trouble and somebody's had to use public money, our money, in order to cover up what was going on. But, can you just tell us the ledger number? But what have they said to the public? They've said, we can't tell you.
Yes.
Well, let's come back to that very aspect, because this is where we started out. We've got the public interest test, and we've got this bit here, which is, we can't tell you because it was substantially prejudice Audit Scotland's ability to effectively carry out its role and remit. We can't tell you because then you'd know what was going on, and of course everybody would know that what we're really dealing with is a Scottish Government cover-up of child abuse.
Yes, and of course the Scottish elections on the 5th of May. So I don't think the SNP would particularly like this to come to the public domain, particularly the fact that the former First Minister, had broken the law twice in relation to the horrific multiple rape of an Aberdeen Down syndrome girl.
Robert, thank you very much for joining us. I'll just say to all of our viewers and listeners that if you look at anything going on at the moment regarding politics in UK, we see the financial problems, we see immigration, we see the loss of jobs. We see the country descending into a terrible state. Of course, what is the powerhouse that enables these corrupt politicians to be used to carry out all of these policies? It's child abuse. That is the ultimate secret controlling the British government, controlling governments north and south of the border. We've got the same thing going on in Wales. The Linda Lewis case showing exactly the same thing. Massive cover-up within the Welsh government of the stealing of children. We want to get the lid off all these other subjects happening in the country. We need to understand the depth of corruption amongst British politicians. And if you're listening from overseas, we are warning you again today that should you bring children into the United Kingdom, there is no way of guaranteeing their safety, that they will not be taken for government-sponsored paedophile rings. Well, thank you very much for joining us for today's special UK Column News. Robert, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. And if I may, just before we finish, just to thank all the people who've kindly supported me over the years when I was in prison, and also more recently about all the kind letters and good wishes when it was my unfortunate 70th birthday, which I wasn't really going to bring up, but I should thank people.
You don't look it.
Look older, yes.
No, not at all. A very good point. A lot of people say to us, yes, but what can we do? You have got to speak out. You have got to be speaking out. You've got to be emailing, texting, writing letters. You've got to be camped out in front of local social services offices. Above all, we need to pin the blame on real people. It's not governments that cause this problem. It's not social services organisations. It's real men and women. They have names, they have job titles, they have home addresses, and the blame needs to be put clearly at their door.
I quite agree with you, Brian. That's absolutely correct advice.
Okay, Robert, thank you. We will be back at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.